Long before the first stone city was ever laid, long before the scratch of a pen recorded a single law, our ancestors lived in a world dictated entirely by tooth, claw, and the relentless cycle of the seasons. To picture a prehistoric human is often to picture a creature of pure instinct, huddled in a cave, shivering in the dark, and waiting simply to be devoured by the wild. But that image misses the profound, quiet brilliance that allowed our species to not only survive the most brutal environments on Earth, but to eventually conquer them. The human story is not one of overwhelming physical strength. We were never the biggest, the fastest, or the most heavily armored beasts on the landscape. Instead, our greatest evolutionary weapon was an almost stubborn quiet resilience, a capacity to endure endless hardship, to adapt when all options seemed exhausted, and to find a way forward even when the sky itself seemed determined to wash us away. This brutal crucible forged a species capable of incredible endurance, laying the foundation for everything we recognize as modern human civilization today. Consider what it truly meant to face the elements in the deep past, long before waterproof garments or permanent shelter existed. When the rains came, they did not arrive as a brief afternoon shower to be waited out beneath an awning. In certain eras and regions, particularly during periods of dramatic climatic shift, the rains could be relentless, falling for days, weeks, or even months without a single break in the gray horizon. For a small band of hunter-gatherers, this kind of endless weather was an existential crisis. The world turned to mud. Firewood, the ultimate currency of survival, became soaked and useless, locked away in damp bark that refused to catch a spark. Meat hunted just hours before began to rot in the heavy humidity, and the warmth of a hearth, the very heart of early human community, was reduced to a bitter, smoking ember. Every single physical movement required expending precious calories that were nearly impossible to replace while the storm raged outside. In these moments of profound isolation, the pressure on human psychology must have been immense. Survival depended entirely on the group's collective memory and social bonds. Unlike solitary predators who retreat to individual dens, early humans relied on the sharing of knowledge passed down through generations. An elder might remember a previous season when the lowlands flooded, recalling the specific high-altitude caves that remained dry, or the precise type of resin-heavy pine roots buried deep beneath topsoil that could still catch a flame if shielded carefully within a double-layered leather pouch. This was the birth of true strategic thinking, not just reacting to the immediate terror of a storm, but anticipating the systemic collapse of the environment and moving before the escape routes were entirely choked by rising waters. Without this deep oral transmission of knowledge, entire lineages vanished quietly into the mud of history. As the rain lashed against makeshift barriers of woven branches and heavy hides, the daily routine of gathering shifted inward. The rhythm of life slowed to the pace of dripping water. In the dim, flickering light of fat-burning lamps, hands that usually held spears or digging sticks turned to other tasks. This was the crucible where oral traditions, myths, and early symbolic thinking were forged. To keep despair at bay, stories were told. Tales of heroic ancestors who had outsmarted fierce beasts or crossed endless frozen wastes. These narratives were not mere entertainment. They were vital survival software, encoding geographic maps, animal behaviors, and social rules into memorable poetic forms that could be recited over and over again until every child in the tribe knew them by heart. Language became the invisible thread holding fractured groups together against the overwhelming weight of nature. The daily struggle for caloric intake was another silent killer that hunted our ancestors long before a predator ever locked jaws around them. In the harsh wilderness of the ancient world, food was never guaranteed, and a failed hunting expedition or a sudden unseasonal frost could spell absolute doom for an entire family group. Early humans had to master the delicate art of foraging, knowing precisely which roots were packed with vital carbohydrates, which leaves possessed medicinal properties to fight off deadly infections, and which seasonal berries were poisonous. This intricate botanical encyclopedia was not written in books. It was etched into the minds of tribal elders who passed down precise instructions through spoken word and rhythmic chants. Every meal was a hard-fought victory against starvation, requiring meticulous planning, tracking skills, and deep cooperative labor where food was shared equally among the group to ensure the survival of the collective rather than just the individual. Furthermore, the physical adaptations that allowed us to conquer these hostile environments transformed our bodies in ways that distinguish us from every other living primate. Our shoulders evolved a specialized rotator cuff mechanism designed specifically for throwing projectiles with incredible speed and torque. This single biomechanical shift changed our relationship with the surrounding ecosystem entirely. We were no longer forced to close the distance and wrestle a dangerous beast in hand-to-hand combat. We could stand safely at a distance and hurl heavy stone-tipped spears with lethal precision. This ability to project force outward gave early humans an unprecedented psychological advantage. Predators that relied on raw physical aggression suddenly found themselves targeted by an invisible, intelligent enemy that could strike from the safety of high ledges or dense brush, fundamentally rewriting the power dynamics of the ancient world. As human social networks expanded beyond small family units into larger tribes and clans, the complexity of our communication grew exponentially. Sharing detailed information about distant water sources, animal migration patterns, and approaching weather fronts required a sophisticated lexicon that went far beyond simple warning signals. Language became the glue that bound human societies together, allowing tribes to coordinate large-scale defensive operations against competing predator packs and hostile hominid groups. This linguistic leap also enabled the transmission of abstract concepts, cultural taboos, and shared beliefs, creating an invisible moral framework that guided behavior and reinforced group cohesion during times of extreme crisis. Through the power of speech, human communities could think as a single unified organism, anticipating threats before they materialized and adapting to environmental shifts with a speed that biological evolution alone could never match. To truly grasp how terrifying this prehistoric world was, we must look closer at the sheer physical asymmetry of the conflicts between humans and carnivores. A single adult saber-toothed cat possessed neck musculature and upper canine teeth engineered to deliver a clean, devastating bite to the throat or abdomen of large mammals. When early humans encountered these creatures in dense brush or near riverbanks, there was no room for error. A missed throw with a primitive stone or a wooden spear meant instant death. This constant, relentless pressure acted as a massive evolutionary filter. Individuals who lacked spatial awareness, who were too slow to react to subtle rustling in the leaves, or who lacked the capacity to form tight social bonds were systematically removed from the gene pool. Only those with sharper minds, quicker cooperative reflexes, and an innate respect for the dangers of the wilderness survived long enough to pass down their traits. This brutal natural selection forged a human brain uniquely obsessed with pattern recognition, danger detection, and strategic foresight, turning our deep-seated paranoia into our greatest evolutionary asset. Moreover, the competition for resources extended far beyond big cats and hyenas. Ancient caves and prime shelter locations were fiercely contested real estate. Cave bears, giant hyenas, and saber-toothed cats frequently utilized the exact same limestone caverns for hibernation and denning that early humans desperately needed for overnight protection. Securing a cave was rarely a peaceful negotiation. It required calculated warfare using blazing torches, hurled boulders, and coordinated group attacks to evict entrenched apex predators. This ongoing struggle forced our ancestors to innovate rapidly, developing complex tactical communication long before the advent of modern language. Simple hand gestures, synchronized grunts, and visual signals allowed hunters to encircle predators, trap them in dead ends, and reclaim vital territory. Every successful eviction of a predator from a cave system marked a monumental milestone in human history, a rare moment where the hunted turned the tables and claimed dominance over their darkest fears. Yet, surviving the rain and the beasts was only part of the battle. The psychological scars of this predatory era are embedded so deeply into our nervous systems that they influence our behavior to this very day. Modern psychological studies on human phobias reveal that people are infinitely more likely to develop an immediate, irrational fear of snakes, spiders, and large carnivores than they are of modern, statistically deadlier hazards like automobiles or electrical outlets. This is not a coincidence or a learned cultural quirk. It is an ancient evolutionary legacy. Our ancestors who treated harmless herbivores with suspicion or ignored the silent stalking of a predator did not survive to have descendants. We are the direct, unbroken bloodline of the paranoid, the hypervigilant, and the fiercely cooperative. Every fear response, every sudden spike of adrenaline when hearing an unfamiliar noise in the dark, and every instinctual urge to hurl an object at a threat is a living echo of the millions of years our species spent fighting for survival against the deadliest beasts the Earth has ever known. The turning point in this dynamic, the moment the balance of terror shifted, came not from a sudden mutation in our bodies, but from the mastery of coordinated, lethal intelligence. It was the invention of distance weapons, the strategic use of fire, and the terrifying efficiency of persistence hunting. Early humans realized they could not outrun a deer in a sprint, but they could track it for hours under the blistering sun until the animal collapsed from heat exhaustion. They learned to hunt in organized packs, communicating through complex gestures and vocalizations, surrounding dangerous beasts with walls of flame and sharpened wooden spears hardened in fire. Over thousands of generations, this relentless predatory pressure created an evolutionary imprint on the animal mind. The creatures that survived were the ones that learned a healthy, life-saving terror of the upright ape. Fear became genetic. Animals that did not run from humans were simply hunted to extinction, leaving behind a wild population programmed to flee at the mere hint of a human footprint or the crack of a dry twig. This rising dominance over the animal kingdom gave humans a strange new psychological burden: the awareness of mortality and the heavy weight of grief. When you look at the archaeological record, you find evidence that our ancestors were among the very few creatures on Earth who began to care deeply about what happened to their dead long after the breath had left their bodies. Deep inside dark, echoing limestone caves, archaeologists have uncovered ancient burial sites dating back well over 100,000 years. These were not just convenient garbage disposal pits for bodies. They were carefully prepared resting places, often sprinkled with red ochre, a symbolic earth pigment representing blood and life, and accompanied by grave goods like flower offerings, delicate shell beads, and heavy stone tools. This profound emotional shift marked a major milestone in human consciousness, separating us permanently from the instinctive behaviors of the animal kingdom. To bury the dead is to acknowledge the ultimate permanence of loss, and it requires a level of abstract thought that separates us from the rest of the natural world. Why did early humans spend precious energy digging graves in the frozen ground or carrying heavy stones to seal a burial chamber? Because the bonds they formed within their tribes were too strong to simply be severed by death. The emergence of grief was the price we paid for deep empathy. When an experienced hunter or a wise healer passed away, the community did not just lose a pair of hands. They lost an archive of survival knowledge. Burying them with care was an act of profound respect, but it was also a way of processing communal trauma, cementing social ties, and reinforcing the idea that the individual mattered to the collective, even in absence. It created an invisible web of trust that spanned across generations. When we look back at the grand sweep of human history, it becomes abundantly clear that our survival was never guaranteed by the universe. Every single person alive today is the descendant of individuals who faced impossible odds, starvation, freezing winters, and predatory monsters, and yet somehow found a way to wake up the next morning and keep moving. The sheer resilience encoded in our DNA is a testament to the power of cooperation, storytelling, and adaptability. As we continue to face new and complex challenges in our modern world, the echoes of those ancient struggles remain within us. We are the legacy of the survivors who learned to tame fire, outsmart the greatest predators of the Pleistocene epoch, and turn their deepest fears into art, culture, and community. That spirit of endurance is our true heritage, reminding us that no matter how dark or uncertain the future may seem, human ingenuity and collective strength have always found a way to illuminate the path ahead. These burial rituals and shared grief practices laid the invisible foundation for everything we recognize as human civilization today. Every time we gather to remember someone, every time we build a monument, or pass down a family story, we are reenacting rituals that were first whispered around smoky fires tens of thousands of years ago in the shadow of encroaching ice sheets and endless rain. This incredible evolutionary journey from vulnerable prey to planetary guardians proves that our greatest strength was never physical force. It was our ability to look an impossible, terrifying environment in the face, unite with our tribe, and rewrite the rules of survival through sheer intelligence, relentless endurance, and unbreakable community bonds. We built a legacy out of bone, fire, and willpower that echoes through time. Our ancestors did not survive because they were invincible. They survived because they could look across a dark, dangerous landscape, feel the primal chill of fear, and choose to reach out to one another, share a spark of warmth, and keep walking forward into the unknown.